The penthouse gleamed with opulence, its glass walls reflecting the city lights like a mosaic of stars. Victoria Carlyle stood at the edge of the vast living room. The skyline sprawled before her, a testament to her vision and relentless ambition. Tonight marked her 15th wedding anniversary, a milestone she had chosen to celebrate in grand style. For Victoria, every detail was a statement. The peonies arranged in delicate clusters, the crystal chandeliers refracting golden light, the champagne bubbling in flutes held by the elite of the tech world. This was no mere anniversary, it was a showcase of the empire she and James had built, a fusion of love, partnership, and brilliance that had captivated everyone. But amidst the glittering smiles and admiring glances, a faint unease settled over her. Victoria's dress, an exquisite creation of midnight silk and diamond accents, sparkled under the lights, drawing envious gazes. Her colleagues approached her with congratulatory toasts, showering her with praise for the life she had built. 15 years and still at the top of your game, said Amanda, a fellow executive, as she raised her glass. You're an inspiration to all of us. Victoria smiled graciously, her practiced charm in full effect. Yet, her attention was drawn to the man who had been the focal point of her life for years. James Carlyle, her husband and COO, was the perfect complement to her. Where Victoria was sharp and unyielding, James was charismatic and approachable. Together, they were a force to be reckoned with. But tonight James seemed off. His easy charm felt forced, his eyes darting frequently to his phone. His laughter, which usually rang true, seemed hollow. She watched him as he leaned in close to her brother, Ethan. The two were deep in conversation, their voices too low for her to catch over the hum of the gathering. Victoria's instincts, honed by years of negotiating high-stakes deals, picked up on the tension. James's smile faltered, his posture rigid, as if he carried a weight he wasn't ready to share. Ethan laughed suddenly, a nervous, brittle sound that made Victoria's stomach twist. She approached them, her heels clicking softly on the marble floor. "What's so amusing?" she asked lightly, tilting her head. James straightened, his face quickly masking whatever had been troubling him. "Just reminiscing about the old days," he said smoothly, wrapping an arm around her waist. The scent of his cologne, usually comforting, now felt cloying. Ethan avoided her gaze, his expression tightening before he excused himself to mingle with other guests. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of pleasantries and champagne, but the unease lingered. Victoria caught James glancing at his phone more than once, his fingers typing rapid messages that he quickly hid. Even the peonies, her favorite flower, which James had insisted on, seemed to mock her with their perfection. She tried to shake off the feeling, telling herself she was overthinking. But deep down, she knew better. As the night wore on, Victoria retreated to the balcony for a moment of solitude. The city stretched out before her, a constellation of lights she had helped illuminate. Yet, for all her achievements, an unfamiliar void opened within her. She glanced back inside, where James was now laughing with a group of their friends, the picture of ease. Her chest tightened as she realized something had shifted, not just in him, but in the foundation of their life together. Unbeknownst to the guests swirling in celebration, the cracks in Victoria's perfect life had begun to surface, and as she stood beneath the vast expanse of false stars, a storm was quietly gathering, ready to upend the world she had so meticulously built. The apartment was uncharacteristically silent that evening as Victoria Carlyle paced the spacious living room. The laughter of the anniversary celebration had faded into memory, replaced by the gnawing suspicion that something was wrong. James's distant behavior, Ethan's nervous laughter, and the secrecy that seemed to cloak them both had planted a seed of doubt in her mind, a seed that refused to be ignored. 2 nights later, James claimed he had a late meeting at the firm. Victoria's heart tightened as she watched him leave, his movements too casual, his excuses too well practiced. It wasn't like James to be so detached. He had always been her rock, the one person she could count on. But now, something about him felt like a lie. Victoria glanced at the clock. If James was indeed at the office, she reasoned, it would be easy enough to confirm. She hesitated for only a moment before reaching for her phone, her fingers trembling slightly. She opened the tracking app she had once dismissed as a paranoid indulgence but had installed at a friend's insistence during a business trip years ago. The blinking dot representing James's location appeared on the screen, not at his office, but in a park on the other side of the city. The realization sent a jolt through her. She told herself there could be an innocent explanation, but doubt had taken root. The urge to confront him immediately warred with her usual restraint. Instead, she decided to go to the park. She needed to see the truth with her own eyes. It was nearly midnight when Victoria pulled into the park's small parking lot. The area was quiet, illuminated only by scattered streetlights and the silver glow of the moon. She stepped out of her car, her heels sinking slightly into the soft earth. Her heart pounded as she followed the path, indicated by James's location on her phone. She stopped short when she saw him. James lay sprawled on a blanket beneath the stars, his face illuminated by the faint glow of his phone. Beside him was Celeste, her company's new marketing director. The two were too close. Victoria's breath caught as she watched Celeste laugh softly, leaning in to whisper something to James. He responded with a gentle smile that Victoria hadn't seen in months. She stood frozen, the scene before her unfolding like a nightmare she couldn't escape. James reached out to tuck a strand of hair behind Celeste's ear, the gesture tender, intimate. They spoke in hushed tones, their connection undeniable. Victoria's mind raced, piecing together the fragments of suspicion that had haunted her for weeks. The late nights, the secretive texts, the tension at their anniversary party, it all made sense now. Her chest tightened, a mix of pain and fury swelling within her. She wanted to confront them, to demand an explanation, but she couldn't move. Instead, she retreated, her steps silent and deliberate. Back in her car, Victoria sat gripping the steering wheel. She felt a wave of nausea, not just from James's betrayal, but from what it meant. He wasn't merely her husband, he was her partner in the company they had built together, the foundation of her personal and professional life. If he was capable of this, what else might he be hiding? The betrayal was no longer just personal, it threatened everything she had worked for. For the first time in years, Victoria felt powerless. But as the initial shock began to subside, she felt something else rise in its place, a cold, steely determination. If James had chosen to deceive her, he would regret underestimating her resolve. The days after Victoria's devastating discovery were marked by an eerie quiet in her life. Outwardly, she continued to play the role of the polished entrepreneur and devoted wife, attending meetings, smiling at colleagues, and performing the part expected of her. But beneath the composed surface, her mind raced with questions and strategies. The betrayal was no longer a private wound, but a potential fissure in everything she had built. Determined not to act on raw emotion, Victoria began her investigation. She told herself she needed clarity before confronting James, but deep down, she wanted more than just answers, she wanted proof. Proof of what her husband was doing behind her back, and perhaps more importantly, why. One evening, Victoria combed through James's work laptop, an act she had never considered in their 15 years together. Her hands trembled slightly as she searched through emails and messages. At first, there was nothing incriminating, just routine correspondence and harmless notes. But then, buried in a folder marked personal projects, she found a series of encrypted documents. Her pulse quickened as she downloaded them onto a secure drive, knowing she would need professional help to decode their contents. Her instincts led her to another source. Ethan. Her brother had always been loyal to her, but his odd behavior at the anniversary party suggested he was hiding something. Over coffee one morning, Victoria gently probed him, her questions laced with casual warmth. Ethan's responses were stilted, his gaze darting away as he sipped his drink. She pressed him, asking pointedly if James had confided anything unusual. Finally, Ethan's nervous laugh gave way to a pained confession. He said he needed help, Ethan admitted, his voice barely audible. He told me things at the company were complicated, that he needed to protect you. What kind of help, Ethan? Victoria's voice was sharp now, her patience fraying. Ethan looked down at his cup, unable to meet her eyes. He asked me to handle some money transfers. He said they were routine, but they didn't feel right. The pieces began to fall into place. With her suspicions growing, Victoria hired a private investigator. The following week, the investigator handed her a file filled with damning evidence. The betrayal was far more extensive than she had imagined. James and Celeste weren't merely engaged in an affair, they were actively conspiring to sell confidential company data to a competitor. Worse, Ethan was implicated in their scheme, driven by his mounting personal debts. The investigator also uncovered Celeste's calculated entry into Victoria's life. Her qualifications had been exaggerated, her references carefully chosen. It was no coincidence that she had been hired just as the company had begun discussions with its largest rival. Celeste had been planted with a singular purpose: to dismantle Victoria's empire from within. Victoria sat in her penthouse, staring out at the city she had helped shape. Her hands gripped the edge of her desk as the weight of the revelations bore down on her. James's betrayal wasn't a moment of weakness. It was a calculated effort to destroy her not just personally, but professionally. And yet, amidst the storm of emotions, a singular thought began to form: she would not let them win. Her heartbreak was real, but it would not define her. Victoria was not just a victim of their treachery, She was the architect of her own destiny. And now, it was time to rewrite the ending. Victoria Carlyle had spent years mastering the art of strategy, her sharp intellect and unyielding focus transforming her into one of the most respected figures in the tech industry. Betrayal had cracked the foundation of her life, but it had not broken her. Instead, it had awakened a fierce resolve. She would not merely confront James and his accomplices, she would dismantle their scheme with the same precision she had used to build her empire. Her first step was to secure her assets. Using the same encrypted system she had designed to protect her company's sensitive data, Victoria began transferring her finances into inaccessible accounts. She changed passwords, locked down joint ventures, and alerted her legal team to prepare for a potential financial inquiry. If James and Celeste intended to steal from her, they would find themselves grasping at empty air. Next, Victoria deepened her investigation. Armed with the encrypted files she had recovered from James's laptop, she sought out her most trusted ally, Marcus Tillman, a cybersecurity expert and one of the few people who knew her well enough to understand the gravity of her situation without asking too many questions. Over the course of a tense weekend, Marcus decoded the files, revealing a damning trail of emails, financial transactions, and meeting notes. Each document confirmed her worst fears. James and Celeste were not just plotting to sell company secrets, they were framing Victoria for the financial irregularities that would inevitably arise from their betrayal. "Do you see this?" Marcus said, pointing to an email thread between James and Celeste. "They've been orchestrating this for months. The accounts they're using are registered under your name." Victoria felt a chill run through her. James hadn't just betrayed her, he had planned to ruin her reputation entirely. But as she examined the evidence, her resolve hardened. They had left a trail, and she would use it to her advantage. Victoria's plan unfolded with surgical precision. She began planting seeds of doubt in the minds of key board members. During casual conversations, she hinted at upcoming security reviews and audits, ensuring that any irregularities uncovered would raise suspicions about the true culprits. She also scheduled an impromptu shareholders meeting, framing it as a strategic discussion about the company's future. In reality, it was her battleground. Behind the scenes, she coordinated with her private investigator to gather hard evidence against James, Celeste, and even Ethan. Surveillance footage, recorded phone calls, and forensic financial analyses painted a vivid picture of their conspiracy. Victoria made sure every piece of evidence was airtight, leaving no room for rebuttal. On the morning of the meeting, Victoria stood before the mirror in her penthouse, her reflection calm and composed. She wore a tailored navy suit, a symbol of authority and control. In her hand was a flash drive containing the evidence that would not only expose her betrayers, but also ensure their downfall. That afternoon, as she stood before the gathered shareholders, her voice was steady. She presented her findings with methodical clarity, each revelation more shocking than the last. Screens displayed incriminating documents, while audio recordings filled the room with James and Celeste's voices plotting her destruction. Gasps rippled through the audience as the weight of the betrayal became undeniable. James sat frozen, his charm and confidence stripped away under the weight of the evidence. Celeste bolted from the room, her face pale. Ethan stammered an apology, but Victoria silenced him with a withering glare. By the end of the meeting, Victoria had not only neutralized the threat to her company, but had ensured that James, Celeste, and Ethan would face legal consequences. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself a small, triumphant smile. The reckoning was complete, but the battle was far from over. The aftermath of Victoria's revelation spread quickly, rippling through the tech world and her personal life. The once glorious partnership between her and James was now the subject of scandal and scrutiny. Celeste had vanished from the city, her resignation from the company sent via an anonymous email. Ethan, cornered by his role in the conspiracy, agreed to cooperate with authorities in exchange for leniency, a betrayal of James that further deepened Victoria's sense of justice. But the victory came at a steep cost. The empire Victoria had fought to protect remained intact, yet her personal life lay in ruins. Friends she had trusted now eyed her with suspicion, as the media painted a portrait of power, betrayal, and corporate intrigue. Despite clearing her name, whispers of impropriety followed her like shadows, threatening to eclipse the hard-won respect she had cultivated over the years. 1 week after the explosive shareholders' meeting, Victoria found herself drawn to the hilltop park where she had first uncovered James's betrayal. The stars stretched across the sky, unchanging and indifferent to her turmoil. She stood at the spot where she had once felt her world collapse, now holding her phone tightly in her hand. It buzzed with a message, a single line that sent a chill down her spine. You may have won this battle, Victoria, but you'll never see the next strike coming. The number was untraceable, but the implication was clear. Though James and Celeste's plot had been dismantled, the web of deceit extended far beyond her immediate reach. The competitor they had conspired with remained anonymous, their motives veiled in shadows. Victoria understood this was not an end, but the beginning of a larger war. She inhaled deeply, the cool night air filling her lungs. The stars above, once a source of wonder and inspiration, now felt like silent witnesses to her struggles. The woman who had gazed up at these constellations with love and trust was gone. In her place stood someone colder, sharper, and more resolute. Victoria turned and walked back to her car, her heels crunching softly on the gravel path. The message had not unnerved her, it had clarified her purpose. Betrayal might have broken her heart, but it had also sharpened her instincts. Her battle was far from over, and as she drove into the city lights, she vowed that no shadow, no threat, and no adversary would ever outmaneuver her again.